Mutations for GCSE biology. So mutations don't affect your environmental factors. So factors that are influenced by your environment. For example, a tattoo you might get because of your life choices, or your hair length, or say your language or accent, or scars from injuries you may have in your life. These are not affected by mutations because mutations, what they do, mutations are random changes to your DNA, and DNA is what you get passed on from your parents. So these are going to affect things like your eye color or your blood type or I don't know, some other things. So mutations affect these sort of things, not your environmental factors like tattoos, hair length, language, your accent, or your scars. And mutations are basically random changes to the DNA and can take place during cell division. So you're taking a look at mitosis and meiosis, right? It's when the cells divide, and mitosis, it divides into 2 identical cells. Meiosis divides into 4 unique cells, and these cells are haploid cells, right? So they only contain 23 chromosomes with no pairs. That's no pairs, yeah, and that's for meiosis. So what do you think mutations will occur in? During mitosis or meiosis? Most likely meiosis, right? Because mitosis creates 2 identical cells. Meiosis produces 4 unique cells, and these cells are actually called are most likely used for gametes like sex or sperm or egg cells that produce a new baby. So it's most likely going to occur in meiosis, and because it's going to create unique cells as well, right? When you're creating 2 identical ones, most likely not going to have much changes happen. Anyways, so mutations take place all the time. Mutations occur all the time. Apologies. All the time. It's not a rare thing. It's very common, actually. The part of mutation that is rare is to get a mutation that's beneficial to you. But mutation itself happens all the time, and most of the time, the vast majority of times actually, it's unnoticeable. It's little changes that you don't notice, that don't really have any effects on your phenotype, your physical traits that are visible. So most mutations have no effect on phenotype, your physical traits. Most. Not all, some will have an effect, but most will have none. Some can influence the phenotype. For example, a mutation for tall alleles may lead to tallness if your diet is suitable. So that's a combination of both your genes and your environment, right? So some factors, some mutations can affect your phenotype, such as your height, by influencing your alleles that make you grow a bit taller. And some, a very small number, can determine the phenotype. Very few mutations, very, very few, can determine the phenotype. Not just influence, but determine the phenotype. An example of that would be, say, your eye color. That could be determined by a mutation. Your parents might both have blue eyes, but there might have been a mutation in the genes that leads you to have red eyes, for example. And that'll be a very, very few, very rare. And it's extremely rare for a mutation. Extremely rare. So everything before was very few have influence on the phenotype, most have no effect, and some might influence it, like your height affecting your genes. Very few will determine, but extremely rare, it's like super, super rare, the rarest of the rarest, leads to a new phenotype due to a mutation. So a new phenotype means something that's never been seen before. That could be, say, having 3 arms, something never before seen. Extremely rare mutation, but it could potentially happen, although super unlikely. The new phenotype can either be beneficial, neutral, so has no effect, or it could actually just be completely negative. Would having 3 arms be beneficial, neutral, or negative? I don't know. It might be a mix of both, but who knows. But the new phenotype could be beneficial, neutral, or negative. And sometimes the new phenotype can be beneficial, especially if the environment changes. and this can lead to a rapid change in the species. For example, I'll try to draw a little rabbit. Looks like a rabbit, right? I'll write rabbit just in case you don't see it. Rabbit. A virus spread in the UK, killing 99% of rabbits. But a mutation occurred among the 1% that survived, which made them resistant to the virus, right? And that's going to be a new phenotype. It was never before seen, but a new mutation amongst the 1% of survivors made them resistant to the virus. And this beneficial phenotype was passed on to different generations because these 99% that didn't have it died. But these 1% survived, so they can reproduce with the other 1% that survived. And because both of them have the trait, most likely their children will also have it, right? And if the children doesn't have it, that's going to die, and it's only the surviving one with the resistance is going to mate with another one that has it. So most likely now, almost 100% it's like widespread in the UK rabbit population. That's basically what a new phenotype kind of would look like. Okay, let's take a look at some beneficial, neutral, and negative mutations. You could write that as good, neutral, and harmful. Good, neutral, or harmful. That's the same thing, but just in different words. So, what's a good thing? Increases chances of survival. Chance of survival. Because remember, we all just want to survive. We want to live. For example, better color vision. You can see your enemies better. Or the rabbit example, being resistant to germs. For example, being resistant to COVID-19 could be a good mutation because it protects you from diseases. A neutral would have no effect. It has no change on you. For example, you might get, I don't know, freckles. Freckles might be positive actually. It hides you better amongst your enemies, but neutral, something that you can't notice the change of, has no effect. And harmful is the opposite of good. It will reduce chances of survival. So you really don't want this because it'll make you more likely to die. A common example of this would be diseases like cancer. A mutation of cancer would be really bad. Okay. Now, mutagens are things that increase the risk of a mutation. Mutagens increase chance of mutation. Actually, I should change chance with risk because a mutation isn't something you really want. Of course, some can be beneficial, but most definitely the vast majority will be negative. It won't help you much. So, mutagens are harmful because they damage the DNA. Mutagens damage the DNA. And that makes it more likely to become, like, the DNA is damaged, right? So mutations increase when they are damaged. So if you have mutagens, it's going to increase the chances of damaged genes, which is damaged DNA more specifically, and that's going to increase your chances of mutations. Now, what are some examples of mutagens? Some examples can include radiation. So if you get a bunch of X-rays, although 1 or 2 is safe, if you get 1 every single day of your life, probably not the best because it's radiation. Cigarettes, obviously. Cigarettes are a mutagen. And some cleaning products. The easiest one of the 3 to remember would probably just be cigarettes. We already know that they're harmful, and mutations increase when damaged. Now, cigarettes also include vape as well, of course, because they contain nicotine. Okay, so these increase the chances of mutations because it damages your DNA. So whilst it's theoretically possible, so you might get an increased chance of mutation because you smoke, say, due to smoking. Let me write that as. So increased mutation. You might theoretically be able to get a beneficial mutation from smoking. But the vast majority of mutations will be negative. And an example of that would be lung cancer. You might get lung cancer because you smoke. So don't smoke, guys. You might get a beneficial one, but the vast majority of your mutations will be negative, like cancer. That's pretty much all you have to know for mutations.